Introduce our special guest, and I'm really excited about this because this young man, and it just tells you my age when I can call him a young man. This young man is one of the most earnest, prepared, talented. The game means something to him. And when you talk to your kids about it has to mean something to you, you could have no better example than Kirk Cousins, because not only does he go out and perform on weekends and on Sundays, but he prepares for it during the week. And it's evident when you see him play. When you talk about a guy who knows how to balance everything and put it all together, you're talking about Kirk Cousins, the franchise quarterback of the Minnesota Vikings. Kirk, welcome to the show. It's great to talk with you again. Thanks for taking the time.
Always good to connect with you, Charles. Thanks. Appreciate the kind words. I'm looking forward to having a conversation today.
Yeah, well, all those words are true. If anyone gets to know you, meet you, it's very evident very early. You don't become a three-time captain in college. That's right, folks. 3 times he was elected captain at Michigan State, starting with his sophomore year. We all know how unusual that is. You usually have to wait your turn, but his leadership ability, very evident early. Kirk, I'm going to go back to high school, because when I was in high school and I was getting ready for a game, and I was a quarterback in high school, obviously I wasn't talented enough like you to do it beyond that. But my coaches always talk about, hey, you got to watch film. You got to get ready for a game. And truth of the matter is, I watched film, but what was I watching? You know what I'm saying? So take us back to your high school days, and you started to watch film. Were you watching games, or were you starting to learn how to actually watch film and pick up tendencies and habits and things of that nature?
No, in the high school years, I didn't know how to watch film. That came in college. We did have the capability. We had film, but the extent of it was basically Saturday morning, getting together after a quick lift and eating a donut and watching the game from the night before with your buddies, and basically watching it like you're going to watch a movie. I mean, you're trying to be entertained. There wasn't as much, intricate details of talking about, fundamentals and how to improve. It was more just big picture. And then going into the next week, we did watch tape a little bit early in the week on the opponent, but it's come a long ways. And I came from a smaller high school and a pretty new program, so we were kind of figuring it out as we went. But I was in for a rude awakening when I got to Michigan State, because I had a long ways to go when it came to film study and really learning the game long before you step on the field.
But I love how you said that, because I came from a small school as well, and I think that we watch film very similarly to how you were just describing it. A lot of times when we were in film sessions, my buddies were like, hey, watch this, watch what I do on this play, because you remember your good ones. And then, of course, they never said anything when they had a bad play, me included. So I understood that part. But as you were preparing for college, all right, and you were going through the recruiting process, and I know you had your ups and downs with all of that, but did anyone come to you during the recruiting process and sit down to watch film with you and ask you to carry them through some different things? Was that kind of the intro to what you started to get in college, if indeed that happened?
That's right. I'll never forget when Mark Helfrich, who was the offensive coordinator at Colorado at the time, flew all the way to Michigan and fought through a snowstorm. We actually had a snow day at our school, and school was canceled, but Mark made it to the school. And so we sat down, we talked X's and O's, we watched tape, and that was the most in-depth a coach had been with me in the recruiting process, and really enjoyed it. And it showed me that there was a whole nother level of X's and O's, of study, of quarterback play that I had never even scratched the surface of. And I knew I had my work cut out for me when I got to college. And, when the rubber met the road at training camp, it was exactly as I thought.
I know at this stage now you can essentially speak Latin from watching film. But let's go back to that time with Mark Helfrich, and then immediately thereafter, what were the initial things you learned in breaking down tape and starting to watch film with your quarterback eyes?
Well, you start to learn the language, as you talked about, speaking Latin. While every team has their own verbiage, there are universal terms that you can speak. And when you start to learn those, I think it helps you have a greater command of football, whether that's calling the backers the, Mike, Sam, and Will, whether it's identifying odd fronts, even fronts, split fronts, talking about quarters coverage, cover 2, Tampa 2, 3 deep, 3 weak, 3 strong, based on where the rotation of the safeties is going, true to your formation, field boundary, speaking that football lingo and being able to use it from the tape. I think you really pick up those terms, start to own those terms, and be able to really talk and live and breathe football, probably more from the time you spend watching football on film than from actually being on the practice field and playing. And so film study is just such a big part of it. And And you have to have fun with it. You have to kind of enjoy and look forward to that grind. And that's something that I think my coaches have always embraced, and it's rubbed off on me as well.
Going back to those days at Michigan State, and you're into film study. You're starting to learn all those things you just described, what you're trying to pick up. Coach to player, player to coach communication. You really have to have this down pat so you can speak shorthand, because there's not a lot of time to go through it in long form in a game, is there?
No, you have to get to a place. I mean, there's so much learning as a college quarterback. They're not giving you the play in your helmet like they are in the NFL. So you also need to learn the hand signals that go along with the play, in addition to calling the play, in addition to the defensive identification. And every offensive system will identify blitzes with different terms. So a Sam Mike pressure from the strong side will have a different term in so many different meeting rooms across the country. So you start to learn those terms. And by the time I was a fifth-year senior at Michigan State, I'd had the same quarterback coach for 5 years, been in the same system for 5 years. It just flowed out of me so easily, and it was you were really able to then take the next steps as a player and then be well prepared for pro football. But that was not an easy process at the beginning. I didn't really know what I didn't know, and so I had so much work to do, and I had to really check my ego at the door. Speak up when I didn't know what was going on, when I couldn't keep up, ask questions, and just be a sponge and not be afraid of looking dumb in the meeting, because what you didn't want to do was look dumb on the field. And so you had to be able to speak up in the meeting and ask questions. And we always say a noisy quarterback room is a good quarterback room. So we want to be dialoguing and talking as we watch the film as much as possible.
When did you start to feel like, I'm getting it now, where that came not just for yourself, but as you said, you could be noisy in the room and maybe say, hey, coach, this is what I saw on tape, and really believe in it?
I believe there are those little aha moments, and it's not any one moment, but I do remember training camp, my freshman year of college. I was swimming. The minute they started putting installs on top of installs, I got lost and couldn't keep up. Then you go to the scout team, you kind of push through that freshman year, you get better, you get used to the speed of the game. And then when you show up for spring ball, you realize this is now my second time through these installations, and I'm really starting to have a foundation now. And you notice by the end of spring ball, I'm a different quarterback than I was last August. And then you come around to training camp and you realize, boy, I'm the backup quarterback, but I have command of this huddle, and I can go in and operate if called upon. And then, you get to the next year and you're playing, and that's a new adventure. But you realize by your junior year that, hey, I've gone from a guy who didn't even know what was going on in training camp as a freshman to really being a captain on this football team and having command of this offense and running this operation, no problem. And so that growth just kind of happens as benchmarks, as you keep going and keep putting yourself out there and sitting through those film meetings. Bill Walsh used to say, the accumulation of knowledge is a powerful thing. And it's not any one day that suddenly you learn everything and it all comes together for you, but it's just stacking up a Tuesday, a Wednesday, a Thursday, week after week after week. And over time, that accumulation, stacking those hours of meetings up, becomes a very powerful thing, and you can become a pretty dynamic, capable quarterback.
When you were in college, as you were accumulating that knowledge, we as fans understand that you're playing the same teams in your conference every year, essentially. But it's not always the same coaching staff over there. Right. Yeah. Did you find some of that accumulation of knowledge, Kirk, where guys move from one place to another and all of a sudden you recognize, oh, that's right, he was at X school, he's at Y school, and now I'm seeing that scheme come into play?
That's exactly right. Yeah, jersey color, familiarity with the jersey color of an opponent is pretty irrelevant. It really comes down to defensive coordinators, their tendencies, what they like to live with, and then the personnel. And at times, if you had consistency with personnel, you knew what that pass rusher like a Ryan Kerrigan at Purdue, what he was capable of, or an Adrian Claiborne at Iowa. You knew year after year what you were going to get. And if you faced a Norm Parker at Iowa, you knew you were going to get an under front, cover 6 with quarters to the tight end side and a half covers to the backside. I mean, that was going to be play after play after play. But, the minute Norm Parker moved on, the Iowa defense changed. And the jerseys were the same. But now we're going to see some single safety and some off corners, and you had to be willing to make those adjustments and do those studies year after year. You couldn't just say, hey, I know Iowa, plug and play. You needed to really study it and see what the differences were, year to year and week to week.
Let's advance you now when you go into the NFL. Your 4th round pick with Washington. You go there. They, of course, had picked the 1st round quarterback, and he was called Celebrate and the whole deal. but that didn't mean that in your meetings and your practices and all that, you just kicked back. How did you go ahead advancing your film study as well as what you were doing in terms of preparation as you were getting started watching before you took over as a starter later in your career?
I was so fortunate to be around so many great coaches as a young player. I mean, I'm drafted by Mike Shanahan, who I believe is a Hall of Fame coach. His play caller is Kyle Shanahan. The quarterback coach is Matt LaFleur. The tight ends coach is Sean McVay. Um,
Whatever happened to those guys? Are they still around? Any of them?
I'd say everything worked out for them just as it's worked out for me. So to learn from them, to be around them, especially in the spring when we have time and you can just kind of extend a meeting and just kind of hang out and talk football and kind of let the conversation go where it goes. Just a tremendous benefit to have that as a young player who's learning and kind of is a blank slate. All that time in the film room to learn how they watch tape. And Rex Grossman was the 10-year veteran at the time in the quarterback room with Robert and I both being rookies. And so we, watched him and how he went about his business and how he watched tape and really learned the game both through his eyes and through the coach's eyes. And, Robert was rookie of the year that year, was a Pro Bowl quarterback. And so I had a front row seat to seeing what that should look like and what that kind of play requires of you, both physically and mentally. And so it was just a tremendous learning experience, and wouldn't trade it for the world.
I know not everything is an easy checklist. We all love, in our society, the top 10 plays of this and the top 5 ways to do this. I know it's not like that, but there has to be elements. I would imagine that there have to be elements of how you go about preparing each week. Are there some basic, simple things that you can impart to us when you sit down to start watching an opponent? Where do you start and where does it take you?
I have a very defined routine, and that's what kind of has kept me organized and make me feel like on Sunday morning when I go to the stadium, I'm ready to go, is because I know my routine. I know what it takes to be ready to go, and I just stick to that routine week after week after week. So, Monday after a game, I review the game film. Multiple times I'll watch the film from the day before just to get a feel for that game again and again by myself, with the coaches, maybe by myself again or with the other quarterbacks, I think at the end of the day, there's nothing more valuable than watching yourself in a game. That's what it's all about. That's why we do the work we do. To breeze through yourself in a game, to me, that just doesn't make any sense. I mean, we work year round for only 16 opportunities. Why would we not study those opportunities more than anything else? So I really want to pay attention on Monday to watching that. And then you jump right into your next opponent and you start with games. I just kind of buzz through games to get a feel for the team, how their season has been playing. I usually work backwards from their most recent game, watch the last 2 or 3 opponents, just to get a feel for how they want to play and how they've been playing as of late. And then you really focus on situations. On Monday, I kind of let it be just games, put that away. And then as we get into the middle of the week, start to focus on first and second down and really grind on how do they play in base personnels, first and second down, more traditional downs. And then from there, Thursday turns into third down emphasis, short, medium, and long. And then Friday becomes red zone, and you focus on really the 20 and in as teams are trying to score and the field gets reduced and defenses don't have to defend as much vertical grass. What does that look like? And then Saturday, you really look at short yardage and goal line. And Sunday, you go play the game. Obviously, Saturday night, there's a lot of review, and you have to really go back over all of it as a whole. But that just kind of goes back to the film study and how you kind of break it up as the week goes on. Because if you look at it as an entire opponent, it's overwhelming. So you have to look at it in individual segments day by day or even, hour by hour.
As you break that down and you go through it day to day, how much input are you giving your coaches? How much are you hearing from them during that time frame? Because I know you're practicing, meeting, and install all that. But how much are you saying, okay, this is what I've seen, and you're handing off that information to add to the game plan?
It's an ongoing conversation all week. When it comes to putting together the game plan, I've tended to stay pretty hands off. I say, coaches coach, players play. You call it, I ball it, if you will. So that's been my approach. The other quarterbacks are more heavily involved on Monday and Tuesday. I'll give them a thought here or there if I feel there's something that makes sense. And our other quarterbacks in the room, I kind of encourage them to lend their thoughts. And we kind of have that noisy quarterback room that I talked about. But, it's an ongoing dialogue. Our quarterback coach, Clint Kubiak, last year, who's now our offensive coordinator, we're constantly telling him, hey, I don't like this play. I'm seeing this look from this defense. Are you seeing that? What's our plan if we get this pressure? just that ongoing conversation. And, sometimes you can come across as a negative Nancy because you're always bringing up, what if they do this? What if they do that? And it's a, 2% chance, but you don't want to be caught with the ball in your hand and not have an answer. So you're better off asking it on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, so that on Sunday you say, I've covered all my bases. I know what they could do to me. And you almost want them to bring that pressure or that unique look because you say, I'm ready for it. If you do try to go there, I'll be ready.
I'm glad you brought that up, Kirk, because it is very simple to just totally go along for the ride. And I really don't want people to get the wrong impression, because I've been around you long enough to know that what you said is spot on. Hey, coaches coach, players play. But when you're talking about offering different things and seeing different things, if it's important, you're not going to just let it slide because no one has brought it up. In fact, I actually talked with a big-time coach one time. He said the biggest mistake he made in his career was he's getting ready for a game, and someone pointed something out on tape to him and said, hey, coach, what if this guy does this? And he said he's kind of at the end of his rope, at the end of the oh, God, here's another what if. And he's like, I've watched 6 games. He's never done that. They got into the game. He did exactly what the coach was worried about and wrecked their offense. Yeah. So it taught him a lesson that day. So that's part of it as well, right? Covering all the bases. At whatever point, if there's something in there, you better talk about it.
I mean, when you look at the Hall of Fame coaches, the Hall of Fame quarterbacks, they're going to err on the side of paranoia. Bill Walsh, Sean Payton, those guys are going to grind, make sure there's no stone unturned. Quarterbacks much the same way. Is there a place where you can over-prepare? Yes. I do think we have to, find that balance. And the longer you play and work and see what you need to do, you figure that out and you find what works for you. But if I'm going to err, it's going to be on the side of being over-prepared than under-prepared, as long as you don't, burn yourself out.
And over time, you figured out where that paralysis by analysis line has been. Did you find that earlier in your career that you didn't quite find the line and maybe got into some games and maybe overwhelmed yourself with too many what ifs?
Certainly, as a young player, it's not organized in your head. And so you kind of see the entire game plan and all the pressures and looks they could throw at you as one big, large list of X's and O's coming at you at once. And what I've been able to do as I played longer is really compartmentalize it and understand, hey, they're only playing these certain coverages if I get this front. Or if I'm in, this specific down and distance in the game, they really don't bring that blitz. And so you can kind of shrink the volume of offense and defense that you need to really know based on situations in the game and field position and all that goes with that. So, being able to kind of really organize it in your mind and better understand the league helps you to manage. And then, I found that for my rhythm, I do take one day off a week. On Tuesday, I don't watch tape, and I make sure the other 6, I work very hard. But that 7th day of the week, I truly take off. And I think that's a great barometer for me to pace myself and make sure that Sunday to Sunday I'm physically, mentally, emotionally ready to give everything I have and to do it for a 16 or 17 plus game season.
I know it's different now because I played in the dark ages, so we're not getting all that paper shoved at us. I get all of that. But you're still probably getting some type of a scouting report, a breakdown, the different things that go at it. When you get that, what are the things you go to first? What is the first thing? I know you talk about breaking down first down, second down, and all that. But like when you get that report and you're getting ready for a team, what interests you the most right out of the gate?
Really, the other thing I failed to mention on Monday is I focus on personnel. So let's first talk about the Jims and the Joes before we talk about the X's and the O's. Who do they have on their roster? And as of late, who do they have? That's my wife walking by in the background. But who do they have? Are they injured? Are they healthy? Is a rookie come on as of late? Is there a veteran that's playing better than he has in the past? Is there a veteran that's struggling? Who do we attack? And so you ask those questions of your scouting department, who's been studying that opponent all season long. And, that's a big conversation. Then you want to see if what the scouting department is telling you is showing up on the tape. As you watch this corner, does he really have, elite speed or tight hips and transitions well or struggles to transition? Or, is what you were told maybe not showing up on the tape as much? And so you always want to fact check what you're hearing. And personnel is a big part of it. But then from there, I want to know pressures. I don't ever want a blitz to be a surprise. And so I want to look and see what are the high percentage pressures they're bringing, when are they bringing them, and then how are we going to pick them up? That's a real important piece to understand the protection game and how they're trying to unsettle your protections every single week.
You mentioned earlier about being able to review yourself before you move on to the next opponent. How did I play? How was my footwork? Did I make the right reads? Whatever the questions are, you want to get all those answered before you move on. As you're breaking down game tape of your opponents, you're also learning your own team, I would imagine, to understand, okay, that looks like something we can take advantage of, but does my personnel dictate us being able to take advantage of it? Am I on track with you?
Yeah, Kevin Stefanski, the head coach of the Browns now, was my quarterback coach and then offensive coordinator in Minnesota, and he would always say, players, not plays. And so when they sit there on Monday and Tuesday, people draw up great plays. Coaches will tell me this. We draw up great plays, but the second question we ask after we first drop the play, the next logical step is, who's going to do it? Who's going to do what? And if you can't really defend or explain the who behind the what, then it may not be the best play. And many times when you have the right players, the plays don't need to get complex. In fact, you're better off keeping it simple because players are going to play their best when they own the material and have done it 1,000 times. So the complexity many times really only ought to be there if you feel like there's a deficiency or a limitation when it comes to what you have from a talent standpoint. And the simpler you can be, many times a reflection on how much talent you have on your roster.
So to get to breaking down game film in one sense, knowing who you have, who you work out with in the off season, right? Who's coming in and joining your team as rookies. I mean, you had a prolific one this year in Justin Jefferson in a most unusual year, Kirk, whereas 2020 and we have a global pandemic and getting together may not be optimal. I mean, in fact, it probably wasn't optimal. So how do you go about learning those guys in order to translate that into your play? And then, of course, what you're going to analyze on tape.
We still met in June, Minnesota, at a local high school, just us players. And we told anybody who wasn't comfortable doing that to have no pressure to attend. But we did get together and kind of just got that chance to get to know each other, build a little bit of a foundation, start to kind of make that introduction the best we could over a handful of days before, training camp would eventually start in late July. But, it's interesting because a guy like Justin Jefferson, who was arguably the rookie of the year, in the NFL for what he did at the receiver position for us, he had every excuse to not have a great rookie year in terms of the offseason program not existing and such, the global pandemic and all that we threw at him. And yet he responded with one of the best rookie years that a receiver has ever had. And then you have other guys who you think they check all the boxes, they're high draft picks, and they give it every opportunity to succeed. And for whatever reason, it just doesn't ever click for them. And so sometimes it just comes down to, players got to deliver. But there's no doubt that the more resources we can give a guy, the better he's going to be. And then he's got to be a pro and keep studying, keep being hungry, keep wanting more, and never get, complacent or feel like he's arrived, because that, many times is the enemy of getting better, is being good and thinking up is the enemy of becoming great.
You watch a ton of tape, obviously. As a quarterback, you have to do that. You watch it at different points with your team during your meetings during the week, whether it's cut-ups, right? It's third downs, it's red zone, all those things that you do. Everyone does it differently. Do you take private time with your center and sit down and watch tape and go over situations to make sure you two are aligned? Because I don't know who has line calls, but most quarterbacks I know have overall override to make sure they get it into the spot they want it to be.
Yeah, I better know where they're going. Even if the center's going to make the call, I want to know where that call is before he makes it. And so, yes, Garrett Bradbury is a great center for us. He's started for the last 2 years for us and done a really good job. But, he was a rookie only 2 years ago. And so he was starting for us from day one as a rookie. And that was, a big step in the process, was to say, hey, I'm here for you, but we need to be on the same page. We can't allow your youth and experience to hurt us. And it didn't. I mean, he was a pro from day one. And we have a protection meeting every Thursday morning, talking through every pressure we could see, how we're going to protect it, what our calls are going to be, why they're, and then what the quarterback has to do when they're bringing more than we can block or they're overloading a side. So if I, after I take notes in that meeting, Garrett takes notes, we'll connect, whether it's in the cafeteria or our lockers are next to each other, we'll connect in the locker room and just go over, what was covered? Do we agree with it? Do we not agree with it? And sometimes, don't tell our offensive line coach, Rick Dennison, but sometimes we'll say, hey, I think you and I are both on the same page. I don't know if the coaches want to do it this way, but between you and me, if we get into it on Monday Night Football and we get this look, you and I are on the same page. Let's do this. And so sometimes we even have our own code words and our own approach just to make sure, hey, let's do it the way that we're most comfortable with. Because at the end of the day, we're the ones on the field and we're the ones being filmed. And when the eye in the sky don't lie, let's make sure we're delivering and getting the job done. And so we've always been on the same page from that standpoint.
Let's get out on the field, and whether it's Monday Night Football, Sunday afternoon, Sunday night, Thursday, or of course in this past season, any day of the week. First time that's ever happened in NFL history where there was an NFL game on every single day of the week, which was amazing. The last one was the Christmas game. And so people might remember that one. But bottom line for me now is now you're out on the field. You've done work. The ball's being snapped and snapped and snapped. How do you do reads? How do you, you're in your pass game, Kirk. How do you do certain things? Are you reading, because you always talk about, us announcers, we try and get all esoteric, right? Oh, he's reading high, low, and oh yeah, he's going from here to here, and he's a good reading back or out in the flat all the way back to the corner. What is it like for the guy who's actually doing it? What are those types of reads that you're making during a game?
Reads can get as complex as you want to make them. And I like to simplify or at least organize, if you will. And so the way I've organized it for me is most reads boil down to one of three categories. They're either going to be a man zone read, meaning I'm going to read the play a certain way versus man coverage and another way versus zone coverage. Then you have reads that are shell reads. In other words, the shell of the coverage will dictate how I read it. So if I get a single high safety, I'll read it one way. If I get split safeties, I'll read it another way. Obviously, there are occasional alerts that go beyond that, but at a high level, man zone, shell, and then the final way is just to say pure progression, meaning regardless of shell, single high, man, zone, pressure, no pressure, you are going to read this play 1, 2, 3 every single time. And so I've kind of organized all of my reads into one of those three camps. Is it a man zone? Is it a shell read? Is it a pure progression? And then from there say, okay, what are my problems with the play? How do I audible if I need to? And what's my cover zero check? What's my alert if they were to, for some reason, play a unique coverage? What do I alert or get to? Just the little nuances are unique to each individual play. But at a high level, I think you can organize every read into one of those three. And I think it really helps me have command of whatever comes in. And then obviously in the game, being able to play fast.
In game, it's so easy, right? We get to halftime and one of my colleagues will run up to one of the coaches, and especially in college football, Coach, what are your halftime adjustments going to be? If you're waiting to halftime, you're way behind, aren't you? So how do you go about in-game adjustments? Because you're now watching tape again off the Surface tablet, although it's not tape, it's pictures, and you're getting those looks. How do you do that, and how do you boil that down to make it work so that you can go out the next series and get better?
Many times it's a first two drives thing. I mean, after the first drive, I'm looking at the tablet, at the pictures and saying, okay, what did we see there? How do they defend us? What personnel are they using? What kind of a game do they want to make it is the term that we use. And then the second drive, you kind of use that to say as a sample size, is it showing up again? And is it showing that they want to do something? And again, situationally, first and second down, they may do exactly what you predicted. But third down, you may have expected all zone, and they lock down and play press man. And so you have to make those adjustments. And the coaches are nonstop having those conversations on the sideline of, hey, we had a zone game plan for third down, and we're getting all man. So if that happens going forward, here's our plan. And like you said, those conversations are happening well before halftime. And many times the halftime conversation is more of an emotional conversation of either you're down, we've got to get guys rallied to get back in it. If it's close, we got to tell guys to maintain that laser focus. And if we're up, emotionally, we got to make sure that guys aren't relaxed or settled in, but they still have that same hunger as if it's 0-0. So many times halftime becomes more of an emotional and mental, recalibration, whereas the X's and O's, that should be happening, like you said, for the entire game, all 3 hours.
That accumulation of knowledge, I love that term, and I love what it brings. Because half times in the NFL are 12 minutes. College football, they're 20, and that won't change because of the marching bands. We understand that. So you have more time in college football to maybe go through a checklist or, hey, we like this or we don't like that. An NFL locker room, my impression, Kirk, is that what you have is what you have. And if you're making some changes, you may not have even practiced them, but back in week 6, that was the answer, and you have to go to that recall.
There's no doubt. And many times, I think it's smart of coaches, if we've designed a play, repped a play, and it didn't get called in a game, let's carry it over the next week, or let's make sure it shows up again, because now we have banked reps. We have experience. We've installed it. It's only to our advantage to keep introducing it to the guys, because at some point, whenever we're going to need it, it'll be that much more ready to go than what it otherwise would have been. So I'm a big fan of recycling plays, or reusing them. If you didn't put them in the game, put them back in the next game plan. There's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't mean that a play is only good versus this opponent. And so that's also, I think, a smart way to just make sure your players really own.
I'm a novice quarterback, and I'm lucky enough that you've agreed to sit down and spend some time with me and take me through some tape watching. How do you go about taking me through that in a basic way when I sit down with Kirk Cousins and say, okay, I want to learn how to watch film?
Yeah, I would ask a lot of questions of a quarterback to see kind of their background and where they're coming from. But, I think the big thing is to focus on really 3 levels of a defense, because as a quarterback, I'm going to study a defense. So, looking at the front, is it an odd front? Is it an even front? Protection is kind of where it starts, and the front is where protection starts. So you got to make sure you're protected. You got to make sure you're not about to get hit, on the side and fumble before you can even read coverage. So I like to know that I'm protected, or how I'm protected, before I even start thinking about a read or about the back end of a coverage. So the front, let's talk through the front, how this protection fits that. If any issues, do we see those issues showing up? And then I want to look at the second level, in terms of linebackers. Where are they? Are they, shifted one way? Are they pretty balanced? Are they pressuring? Do they have depth? Are they kind of playing that game of cat and mouse with me? And then get to the back end, what are my corners doing? And really, it's 2 different things. I think safeties show you one thing. I think corners tell you one thing. And safeties nowadays, they love to lie. They love to say, hey, if I'm going to end up in a split safety coverage, I'm going to show you a single high coverage first for as long as possible. And nowadays, I'll see safeties, the Eddie Jackson with the Bears does a great job of this. He'll be in that split safety look. At the snap, he'll start to go to the middle to make you think that, okay, they're going to the middle, and then he'll baseball turn back to a deep half to try to just keep you confused, so you're never quite sure of what you're getting. So just being able to confirm that back end of what safeties and corners are doing, both pre-snap and post-snap. But once the ball snaps, my eyes cannot be down, cannot be down at the front 4, at the rush. I've got to feel the rush and focus on the back end. And so much the same in film. I'm not blocking the pass rush. So once the ball snapped, I don't watch the pass rush. When I'm watching tape, I watch the coverage. My focus on the front is really pre-snap, making sure I'm taking care of any protection issues that could pop up.
You've watched all the tape. You've watched everything getting ready. As you're practicing during the week, whether it's your scouts, because you got some safeties that are pretty good liars now that you've worked against in practice the last few years, and Harrison Smith and Anthony Harris. But do you ask them to do things that are tendency breakers that you have to adjust to in practice during the week in order for that possibility to occur during a game?
Yes, there is a give and take with the defense of our own team, especially going through training camp. We practice against each other so many times that you love that challenge. And I'll talk to a Harrison Smith or an Anthony Harris after practice, or even after just an individual period, to say, hey, what are your rules there? What were you trying to do? What did you think of what I did at the quarterback position? What makes it hard for you? And I think that ongoing conversation is healthy, and it's what good football teams do. But, we have some good battles back and forth. Coach Zimmer, being a defensive-minded head coach, is going to make practice feel pretty uphill for the offense. So we have to find our way around that. But no doubt that Harrison and Anthony are 2 of the best in the game, and that's only going to make me better on Sundays. But it certainly is going to make August and training camp practices a little more difficult.
You mentioned early in this conversation, Kirk, the grind, that you have to embrace the grind of watching tape. A lot of people want to boil this type of does it take to get it done? People ask me that a little bit about my job, and I've always said, and I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but I've always said I don't measure it in hours. I measure it in whether or not I'm prepared.
Yeah.
Is that somewhat where you would go with that? Like when a youngster comes to you and says, how many hours of tape should I watch per week? What do you tell them?
Yeah, similar to the phrase, practice makes perfect. It's no, perfect practice makes perfect. And so film is no different. To just sit there with your eyes glazed over and run the tape and be on your phone, and next thing you know, 2 hours pass. We all know that's not getting you ready for the game. On the flip side, to be 20 minutes of intense, focused attention on film can be extremely beneficial. So I'm all for efficiency. No need to drag it out or be at the office till 2 a.m. If you can get it done much quicker. So I think, to be efficient, to give laser focus for as long as you can, and then say, hey, I'm not productive anymore. We'll try it again tomorrow. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And you're right. It is a grind to watch film, and yet you've got to do it. And the great ones do. I mean, I've been around, like I said, Mike Shanahan, Kyle Shanahan, Matt LaFleur, Sean McVay, John Gruden, Jay Gruden, and then obviously all my coaches in Minnesota, Gary Stefanski, on offense. I mean, it is a badge of honor to own the material, study teams, know them inside and out through the tape. I mean, that has to be a badge of honor for those coaches. Otherwise, they just wouldn't be able to keep up with how competitive our league is and what it now demands from an X's and O's standpoint.
So does that badge of honor obviously carries over to the person that we all focus in on, and that's the quarterback, for every team, right? So when I say to you the term quarterback lifestyle, if you want to be the best, what do you tell people when you hear that term?
Yeah, I mean, when I think of a true quarterback lifestyle, it's, I tell my family when I leave at the end of July to go into training camp, I say, hey, I'm going under, and I'm not coming up until, January, February, whenever the season ends. And so they know that. And, the off season, yes, you're able to come back up and enjoy time and live a different kind of quarterback lifestyle. But in season, you are locked in, and it is focused on, getting your body right week to week and getting your mind right week to week, and being dialed in to lead your team and give what you need so your teammates have energy and are ready to go. And so a lot of time, and your car usually is one of the first ones to pull into the parking lot in the morning, one of the ones to leave a little later, because that's what it takes to play the position. And again, you don't do it just to do it or to look like you're doing those things. You do it because you do have a plan, you do have a purpose, and you know what you're doing when you enter that building every day. And you study hard, and it shows with the results on the games on Sunday.
Last question, we'll wrap things up. With the way we're able to communicate nowadays, Kirk, it used to be you pick up the phone and call, hey, dial the phone number and all that. Now you can send off texts, you can clip videos, you can do all of those sorts of things. Are those the sort of things that you do as well as you're watching tape during the week to communicate with your teammates? Hey, on this is what I'm seeing. On that's what I'm seeing. Maybe give them a little video example of what's out there. Hey, let's focus on this tomorrow. Those sort of things.
Yes, it's become a very common thing. I'll just be watching film one evening after practice, and I'll text my teammates and say, hey, on this route, I need you to go 2 yards deeper. And that's all it takes. I don't need to wait till tomorrow and wait for him to bring in the meeting room. I'm going to text him right there and just get it handled and communicate it, and they'll text you right back, and we're on the same page. So that constant communication is so important. And I think skill position players, hey, if I'm getting coached, if I'm being told what to do, the quarterback's engaged. He's trying to get me the football. He's keeping an eye out for me. He's looking out for me. So I think that constant communication and almost badgering your teammates is a good sign. It shows that I'm trying to get you the football. I understand the role you can help us with, and keeping them involved.
Kirk, I don't know that I can thank you enough for this time. I think that on behalf of Huddle, Blitz 21, everyone who's on here today, we thank you for giving this time today, for coming on and imparting your knowledge, your expertise. You can see it. I had said at the beginning, there's no one going to be more prepared than you, and you just gave us a great example of that as well. Thank you so much. Continued success to you, the Vikings. Looking forward to the 2021 season. And one of these days, this novice here is going to show up and say, okay, can you walk me through some film and teach me how to watch it and see if you can teach me? I'll be like Denzel in Philadelphia. I'll be like the 5-year-old. Teach me like I'm a 5-year-old, Kirk. Tell me how to do this.
I think you could teach me some things too. When I'm down in Orlando, we'll have to get together and watch some tape. That'd be a lot of fun. But I always enjoyed connecting with you, and you do a great job calling the games. And it's always connecting with all you coaches, and wish you all the best in your seasons upcoming.
Thanks a lot, Kirk. You take care of yourself. All the best to you and yours. Take care and stay safe, okay?
See you guys. Thanks.
All right, great.